The night was cold, much colder than usual, as Jaden walked the empty streets of Riverside. The chill cut through his jacket, the thin material doing little to keep the cold out. His shoes, old and worn, slapped against the cracked pavement with each step. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, not just for warmth, but out of habit. He didn't have much, and what little he had was barely enough to survive. At 12 years old, Jaden had already learned how to stretch $1 in a meal. His stomach growled as he passed the corner store. It was almost 9 p.m., and he hadn't eaten all day. He'd used up the last of his money on a soda and some bread to take home to his little sister, Ava. But there was nothing left for him. He tried not to think about it. The city around him felt heavy tonight. The dull lights flickered as the wind howled, pushing trash along the sidewalk like forgotten dreams. Riverside wasn't a place people liked to talk about. It was the kind of neighborhood that the rest of the world seemed to forget. And Jaden, just another kid trying to make it, didn't mind being invisible. But tonight, something was different. As he walked, he passed a park that he usually avoided, Dunbridge Park. It was a place for people who didn't have anywhere else to go, and the fewer people he encountered, the better. But then something caught his eye. An old man was sitting on a bench, his thin jacket doing little to protect him from the biting wind. He was staring straight ahead, but his eyes were vacant, almost lost. His face was wrinkled with age, and his hands trembled slightly as they rested on his lap. He wasn't moving, just sitting there, completely still. Jaden hesitated for a moment, then walked closer. Something about the old man's solitude pulled at him. He wasn't sure what it was, but it felt wrong to just pass by. "Hey, sir, are you okay?" Jaden called out softly, unsure if the man could hear him. The old man blinked, his eyes shifting slightly as if waking from a deep fog. He looked up, his pale blue eyes clouded with confusion. I don't know," he whispered, his voice frail. "I can't remember." Jaden's heart tightened. He knew the cold. He knew what it felt like when it sank deep into your bones. But he also knew something else, something his mother always taught him. When you see someone in need, you help them. The man was clearly lost, but Jaden had nothing to offer but kindness. He didn't have time to deal with this. Ava needed him, and his mom needed him. But he couldn't shake the feeling that maybe this was where he was meant to be tonight. Taking a deep breath, Jaden stepped closer. "You don't have anywhere to go, do you?" he asked, his voice softer now. The man shook his head slowly, as if the answer was slipping away with every passing second. Jaden glanced around. The park was empty, the streets quiet. There was no one else here, no one to help. A part of him told him to keep walking, but his feet stayed planted in place. "I can help you," Jaden said, the words spilling out before he could think. "You can come with me. I have a place, just for tonight." Jaden's heart raced as he glanced around the dark park. The wind howled, pushing the branches of the trees, as if to remind him of how cold it really was. He couldn't leave the old man here. He just couldn't. His mom had always said, "If you have something to give, you give it." It didn't matter how small the gesture, just as long as you did what was right. The old man's blue eyes, clouded with confusion, met Jaden's gaze, but it seemed like the recognition wasn't quite there. Still, the tremble in his hands and the shiver in his thin frame told Jaden all he needed to know. The man was cold, too cold to be sitting here alone in the night, and the last thing Jaden could do was leave him to freeze. "Come on," Jaden said, his voice steady, though he felt anything but. He took a careful step toward the old man, pulling off his worn-out hoodie. The fabric was thin, barely enough to protect him, but he wasn't about to let the old man sit there shivering. He draped the hoodie around his shoulders, hoping it would offer some warmth. The old man blinked again, confused but grateful. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Jaden gave him a quick nod. "You're welcome," Jaden replied, his throat tight. He took another deep breath, looking at the man who seemed so lost, so fragile. He had no idea where this was going, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't just leave him. "Do you know where you live?" Jaden asked, his hands still gripping the straps of his empty bag. The old man looked down at the ground, the fog of confusion still clouding his mind. I was with someone," he said quietly. "But I can't remember." Jaden swallowed hard. He had no answers, no way of knowing what had brought the man here, or why he was so lost. But Jaden also knew he couldn't leave him out here alone. "It's okay," Jaden said. "I'll take care of you. You can come with me, just for the night. I live nearby." His voice softened, but he was firm in his decision. The old man hesitated, his trembling fingers clutching the fabric of the hoodie Jaden had given him. Slowly, he nodded, as though the idea of being taken care of, even for a brief moment, was too comforting to refuse. "Thank you," the man whispered again, this time with more certainty in his voice. His voice cracked as if the weight of his lost memory was catching up to him. Jaden didn't waste another second. He turned and started walking, guiding the old man along. His footsteps echoed in the quiet street as they made their way toward the small apartment Jaden called home. He could feel the cold nipping at his exposed skin, but the warmth spreading in his chest from helping the old man made it bearable. It was a risk, he knew. His mom wasn't going to like it. But what was the alternative? Leaving the man out here to freeze? It didn't matter that Jaden had nothing to give. He couldn't just walk away. With every step he took, the distance between him and home seemed to grow. But the urgency inside him only increased. The old man's weight was light, but his presence was heavy, pressing down on Jaden's chest with every stride. He had no idea what would happen next. But one thing was clear. Tonight, everything was about to change. Jaden's fingers clenched around the old man's frail wrist as they walked up the cracked steps of his apartment building. The cold air cut through his thin jacket, sending a sharp chill into his bones. He could feel his own stomach growl, reminding him of how long it had been since he'd eaten. There wasn't much waiting for him at home, just some old rice and canned vegetables. But right now, it didn't matter. The old man's unsteady gait made the journey slow, his feet dragging with every step. Jaden kept a steady hand on his arm, guiding him up the narrow stairs. He felt the weight of the decision now, heavier than he had expected. His mother would be furious. She worked long hours, just to make sure they could keep the lights on and the fridge stocked. And Jaden knew she'd never approve of bringing a stranger home, especially one who wasn't even coherent enough to remember his own name. But when he looked at the old man, the helplessness in his eyes, something in Jaden wouldn't let him turn away. He could feel his mom's voice echo in his head. Do the right thing, no matter how hard it is. That's what she always said. When they reached the door to their apartment, Jaden hesitated. His breath clouded in front of him, and he felt a wave of nerves wash over him. He was about to bring a stranger into their already cramped space, and he didn't know how his mom would react. He opened the door, the faint hum of the refrigerator, and the soft glow of the dim light bulb greeting them. His mom, Camille, sat at the kitchen table, her face buried in a pile of bills. Amari, his younger sister, sat on the couch, her small hands clutching a worn-out picture book. The small apartment smelled faintly of stew from the night before, and Jaden could hear the faint creak of the wooden floorboards beneath his feet. Jaden's heart pounded in his chest As he stepped into the room, the old man following close behind, Camille looked up, her dark eyes narrowing in confusion. When she saw the frail figure standing behind Jaden, her brows furrowed, and her mouth opened slightly in disbelief. "Jaden," she said slowly, her voice measured. "Who is this?" Jaden stood tall, his shoulders stiff with uncertainty. "I found him outside," he said quietly. He was cold, and he didn't know where he was. I couldn't just leave him there. Camille's expression flickered between concern and frustration. She opened her mouth to say something, but then she stopped, her eyes drifting to the old man's shaking form. His frail body trembled under his thin jacket, and his face was a pale shade of gray. For a long moment, Camille didn't speak. The room felt heavy, like the air was thick with tension, and Jaden could hear the distant ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, she sighed, rubbing a hand over her face. "We don't have much, Jaden," she said, her voice softening. "But come in. Warm yourself up, sir." The old man blinked, looking at Camille like he didn't quite understand what was happening. But when she gestured for him to sit, he did, his trembling hands clutching the edges of the rickety chair. Jaden let out a quiet breath of relief. His mom's face was still strained, but she quickly moved into action, pulling a pot of soup from the stove. The scent of broth filled the air, comforting in its simplicity. Amari, ever the observant one, hopped off the couch and padded over to the old man. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Are you sick?" she asked, her voice soft and full of innocence. The old man blinked, a small smile forming on his lips. "No, dear," he said quietly. "I'm just lost." Amari nodded thoughtfully, then darted away to the bedroom, returning with a small, patched-up blanket that she carefully draped over his lap. The tenderness in her actions made Jaden's heart swell. His little sister had such a big heart, despite everything they'd been through. Camille placed a steaming bowl of soup in front of the man, the warmth from the bowl rising in the cold air. The old man's hands trembled as he lifted the spoon, his gaze fixed on the meal in front of him, as if it was something he had forgotten how to use. Jaden watched him for a long moment, the way the man stared at the soup as though it was the first real meal he'd had in a long time. When the old man finally spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "Thank you," he said, his words full of quiet gratitude. Jaden looked down at his half-empty bowl, but he didn't feel hungry anymore. He had given the rest of his bread to the old man earlier, and now he didn't even mind. He could feel a warm kind of satisfaction in his chest, something simple but powerful. Helping the man, even in such a small way, had meant something. As the night grew late, and the warmth of the small apartment surrounded them, Jaden felt the exhaustion of the day settle over him. The old man, who had told them his name was James, was sleeping on the couch, curled under Amari's blanket. Jaden, though tired, couldn't bring himself to rest just yet. There was something about the way James had looked at them during dinner, the faint flicker of recognition, of something deeper, that kept Jaden awake. He couldn't help but wonder about James's story. Where had he come from? Who had he been before the confusion had taken hold of him? The night was silent, save for the soft rhythm of the old man's breathing. Jaden shifted on the floor beside the couch, exhausted but too restless to sleep. He glanced over at his mom, who was standing in the kitchen, silently washing dishes. Despite the quiet tension in the room, a part of Jaden felt hopeful. Like tonight, something small and important had shifted. The morning light was just beginning to break through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the room. Jaden rubbed his eyes, the weight of sleep still heavy on his shoulders. He had stayed up late, unable to shake the feeling that Something wasn't quite right about James. There was something about him, the way his eyes flickered when he tried to recall his past. Something familiar, but Jayden couldn't put his finger on it. As the sun rose, the sound of a car engine humming outside the apartment window caught his attention. Jayden glanced out from the kitchen, his eyes narrowing. A sleek black luxury car was parked at the curb, the kind of car that didn't belong on this street. "Who's that?" Camille asked from behind him, her voice tinged with curiosity and concern as she wiped her hands on a dish towel. Jayden stared, his pulse quickening. He hadn't seen a car like that here before. The street was lined with old sedans, rusted trucks, and the occasional delivery van, but never something so pristine, so out of place. Before Jayden could say anything, there was a soft knock at the door. "Stay here," Camille whispered, her eyes flicking to Jayden's. "I'll check." But Jayden was already moving. He couldn't help it. His instincts told him this was important. Whatever was happening outside, whatever was bringing this car to their doorstep. He hurried to the door, his heart beating faster with every step. When he opened it, a man in a sharp black suit stood on the other side. His face was serious, but his eyes, dark and calculating, held a hint of something else, something Jayden couldn't quite read. "Good morning," the man said, his voice smooth but urgent. "I'm looking for someone." "Mr. James Crawford?" Jayden's stomach dropped. The name. It was like a jolt of electricity ran through him. James Crawford. He had heard the name before, but he couldn't place it. "Is he here?" the man asked again, his eyes scanning the apartment. Before Jayden could respond, James shuffled out of the living room, his frail body moving slowly as he approached the door. His eyes widened when he saw the man in the suit, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "Jonathan?" James's voice was shaky, but there was no mistaking the emotion behind it. The man in the suit stepped forward, his expression softening for the first time. "James," he said quietly, "it's been a long time." Jayden stood frozen in the doorway, unsure of what to do or say. His mind was racing, piecing together the strange, quiet moments from last night. The way James had seemed so lost, so vulnerable. "Mr. Crawford," the man continued, his gaze shifting to Jayden. "I'm Jonathan. I'm here to take you home." Jayden swallowed hard. He didn't understand what was happening, but he could feel that this was the moment everything was about to change. "Home?" James repeated, his voice distant. "I don't remember where that is." Jonathan's face softened even more. "It's okay, James. We'll get you back there. We've been looking for you for a while." Camille appeared behind Jayden, her expression a mix of concern and confusion. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice firm but polite. Jonathan turned to her, offering a reassuring smile. "I'm with Mr. Crawford's family. We've been trying to track him down. It seems he's had a bit of an episode, but we've got everything sorted now." Jayden's heart pounded. Everything was happening so fast, and yet it felt like the answers he was looking for were just out of reach. He turned to look at James, who seemed both relieved and overwhelmed. The old man had clearly recognized the stranger, but his mind was still tangled in the fog of Alzheimer's. "Why didn't you tell us?" Jayden blurted out before he could stop himself. "Who are you, really?" James's eyes, full of confusion, met his. I don't remember. I'm sorry, son." Jonathan cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the way the conversation was unfolding. "Mr. Crawford's family is quite wealthy," he said cautiously, as though testing the waters. "And they've been worried sick about him." Jayden's mind raced, trying to comprehend what was happening. Why hadn't James mentioned any of this? The man in the suit, Jonathan, was clearly here to take him back to his life, to whatever world James had come from. The life that felt like it was so far out of reach for someone like Jaden. But before Jaden could say anything else, Jonathan smiled softly and pulled out a thick envelope from his coat pocket. As a token of gratitude for taking care of Mr. Crawford, we wanted to offer you something. Please take this. Jaden stared at the envelope, unable to understand what was happening. He reached out, his fingers brushing the edges of the paper, but before he could open it, Jonathan's voice stopped him. Everything you need will be inside. This is just the beginning, he said, his tone oddly knowing. Jaden felt a mixture of confusion, shock, and something else. A sense that he was standing at the edge of a story that was far bigger than he could ever imagine. As the man in the suit turned to lead James to the waiting car, Jaden stood frozen, the envelope heavy in his hand, unsure of what this unexpected turn in his life would mean. The luxury car pulled away, leaving a trail of exhaust in the still morning air. Jaden stood frozen on the doorstep, staring after it as if the world had just shifted beneath him. His mind was a whirlwind of questions. Who was James Crawford, really? Why had he been living in this small, run-down apartment complex? And what was this envelope he was holding in his hand? He glanced at Camille, who stood next to him with a look of disbelief in her eyes. She hadn't said much during the exchange, but the silence between them spoke volumes. "What just happened?" Camille asked, her voice small, but filled with a mix of curiosity and confusion. Jaden didn't have an answer. His hand clenched tighter around the envelope as if holding it could somehow give him the answers he needed. He looked down at the sleek white envelope, sealed with a gold crest that he hadn't noticed before. There was no name, no address, just the intricate design that made it look far more important than anything he'd ever held. "I don't know," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "But I feel like there's more to this than just helping him. Something doesn't feel right." Camille nodded, clearly torn. "You think they were telling the truth? That James is someone important?" Before Jaden could respond, the envelope seemed to burn in his hand. It was as if the weight of it was urging him to open it, to uncover whatever secrets lay inside. Slowly, he tore open the seal and pulled out a thick, folded letter. The moment his eyes scanned the words, his breath caught in his throat. The letter was addressed to him, to Jaden Evans. "Dear Mr. Evans, on behalf of the Crawford family, we wish to extend our deepest gratitude for the care you've provided to our beloved father, James Crawford. We are aware of your selflessness and generosity during a difficult time, and as such, we would like to offer you the opportunity of a lifetime. Inside this envelope, you will find a key to a new life, a life far beyond your current means. We believe that you are the person who can help us with a very special matter concerning our father. We have been searching for someone like you, someone with the heart and the strength to help us navigate what's to come. Enclosed, you will also find a contract outlining the terms of this arrangement. Please read it carefully. We are certain you will see the potential in this unique opportunity. Kind regards, Jonathan Sterling, personal assistant to the Crawford family." Jaden's hands trembled as he read through the letter. A key? A contract? What was going on? And why was he being offered this opportunity? He turned the envelope over, hoping to find more answers, but all that fell out was a small, ornate key, its silver handle gleaming in the light. Jaden's mind raced. This couldn't be happening. There had to be some mistake. He was just a guy trying to make it through another day, not someone important enough to be involved in whatever game the Crawfords were playing. But as his gaze shifted to Camille, he saw that she too was starting to realize the weight of what had just transpired. The key, the letter, the promise of a new life. It was all so surreal. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" she asked, her voice tense. Jaden looked down at the key again, his heart pounding. Whatever this was, it was bigger than anything he could have imagined. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I have a feeling we're about to find out." Jaden sat at the kitchen table, the key resting on the worn surface in front of him. Camille had gone to bed, but Jaden couldn't bring himself to sleep. The night felt heavier than usual, his thoughts too crowded with the mysteries that had unfolded in the last few hours. Why him? Why now? Why James Crawford? The letter had made it clear. The Crawfords were offering him an opportunity. But what exactly did that mean? He had never considered himself special, just a kid from the neighborhood, trying to help where he could. He wasn't anything like those people in the luxury car, people who could afford to live a life Jaden could only dream of. He was just a boy, with big hopes, and even bigger struggles. But the key. Jaden turned the key over in his fingers. It gleamed brightly in the dim light of their apartment, the engraved handle catching the glow of the single bulb overhead. His eyes traced the ornate carvings, hoping to find some kind of hidden message, something that would explain its purpose. Was it a metaphor? A symbol of something to come? Or was it an actual key to something tangible? Something he could touch and hold? Something that could change everything? He stood up, moving toward the small closet near the front door. The old wooden door creaked as he pushed it open. Inside, he rummaged through a box of items he kept hidden away. Old photos, forgotten trinkets, and the odd letter or two he had kept over the years. He sifted through the clutter, his heart pounding with each passing second. Nothing. No clues. No answers. Jaden dropped back into his chair with a heavy sigh. His eyes fell on the envelope again, and something about it nagged at him, like he was missing something important. Why would James Crawford's family offer this to him? He was no one, just a kid from Riverside City, struggling to keep food on the table for his family. The sudden chime of the doorbell cut through the quiet apartment. Jaden's heart leapt in his chest, his thoughts spinning. Who could it be at this hour? He hesitated for only a moment before walking cautiously to the door, unsure what to expect. Maybe it was the Crawfords, coming back with more questions. Maybe it was someone else entirely. He opened the door slowly, his hand gripping the handle tightly. But when he saw who was standing there, all the words in his mouth vanished. A man stood on the threshold, tall, with an air of quiet authority. His hair was neatly combed, his clothes expensive but simple, like someone who didn't need to prove their wealth. "Jaden Evans?" the man asked, his voice calm, but with a touch of urgency. Jaden nodded, his stomach tightening. "Who are you?" The man offered a slight smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "My name is Carter Whitmore. I work for the Crawford family." He paused, taking a slow breath. "I need to speak with you." Jaden's eyes widened at the mention of the Crawford family. It felt like the walls of the small apartment were closing in on him, the air thick with tension. Carter Whitmore, a man dressed in an expensive coat, stood at the door, his expression serious, but not unkind. The kind of serious that made Jaden's heart race. "Crawford family? What do you want with me?" Jaden's voice cracked slightly, betraying his nerves. Carter took a step forward, glancing around the cramped apartment with a quiet kind of understanding. He wasn't judging, but Jaden couldn't help but feel like this man was from another world, a world that had no place for people like him. "I'm not here to make things difficult," Carter said, his voice softening slightly. "I just need to understand something." Jaden stepped back, motioning for the man to come inside. The last thing he wanted was to keep standing in the hallway, feeling like some kind of fish on display in a glass tank. Carter walked in, his eyes immediately finding James, who was still asleep on the couch, wrapped in the patchy blanket. He moved closer to the sleeping man, his gaze softening as he knelt down beside the couch. It was clear the sight of James, so fragile and small, hit him harder than he expected. Jaden stood back, unsure what to say or do. Carter looked up, meeting Jaden's gaze, his expression more intense now, as if trying to gauge something hidden in the boy's eyes. "I'm guessing you've been wondering why you're being dragged into this mess," he began, his words cutting through the silence. Jaden nodded, swallowing hard. "It's not just because you helped my father," Carter continued, his voice even lower. "It's because of who you are, and what you've done, even when it seemed like no one was watching." Jaden's brow furrowed. "I don't understand." Carter sighed, sitting down in the only chair that wasn't piled high with clutter. "The Crawford family, we don't take things like this lightly. We believe in doing the right thing, in showing gratitude. What you did, bringing my father in, caring for him like he mattered, that's rare, but that's not all." He paused, searching for the right words. "I have a feeling you're more than just a boy from Riverside City." Jaden's mind raced. There was no way this could be about him. He was just a kid who found an old man lost in the cold and brought him inside. That's all. Nothing more. Nothing special. "What do you mean?" Jaden asked, his voice thick with skepticism. Carter stood up slowly, his gaze steady. "I mean that I think you've been dealt a hand in life that not many could survive. But here you are, still fighting. And you're more than just a kid doing good deeds. You're someone who's about to be offered something that could change everything." Jaden felt a cold chill run down his spine. He was starting to understand. But what was Carter really offering? Jaden's heart pounded in his chest, the words Carter had spoken echoing in his mind. "You're more than just a kid." What did that even mean? How could a boy like him, living in a cramped, broken-down apartment, be more than just that? The silence stretched between them, heavy and filled with the weight of unspoken words. Carter stood still for a moment, his eyes scanning the room, as if processing everything. The peeling walls, the flickering light, the mismatched furniture. He looked back at James, still asleep on the couch, before turning his gaze to Jaden. "There's something about you," Carter said finally, his voice low and deliberate. "You're capable of so much more than this life. I've seen it in the way you helped my father, in the way you've carried your own weight, even when no one was watching, and I'm willing to bet on you." Jaden's mind was spinning. What could Carter possibly mean? "I don't want your charity," Jaden blurted, his voice shaking with the frustration he couldn't hold back any longer. He wasn't the kind of kid who accepted handouts. He couldn't be. Carter nodded slowly, as if he had expected that reaction. "I'm not here to give you charity," he said, his tone gentle yet firm. "I'm here to offer you an opportunity, a chance to build a future. Your future." Jaden stared at him, completely dumbfounded. "An opportunity?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes." Carter reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He handed it to Jaden, who took it hesitantly, eyeing the man in front of him. "Inside this envelope is something I think you'll need. Something that could change your life. A scholarship. A chance to go to school. To get out of here. To build a life that's your own." Jaden couldn't breathe. His hands trembled as he held the envelope, the weight of it sinking in. He looked from Carter to his father, and then to his mother, who had been silent up until now. She stepped forward, her face conflicted, her brow furrowed. "Carter, you don't need to do this. We can manage," she said, softly, her voice shaky. But Carter shook his head, his eyes kind. Number, you've already done more than anyone could ever ask. You've given my father care when no one else did. You've shown kindness when the world wouldn't. You deserve something better. Jaden felt the rush of emotions swell up inside him. Anger, confusion, disbelief. He wasn't sure if he wanted to take this chance, or if he wanted to turn it all away and keep fighting on his own. But the thought of a future, of a life beyond this, was almost too much to bear. I don't know what to say, Jaden finally whispered, his voice cracking. You don't have to say anything, Carter replied, his voice quiet but full of understanding. You just have to take it. Jaden stared at the envelope in his hand. For the first time in his life, he realized he might not have to do it all alone. The next few days felt like a blur. Jaden's mind raced with what had happened, with the weight of the scholarship in his hand, and the weight of a future he hadn't even dreamed about. Each time he glanced at the envelope Carter had given him, his heart skipped a beat. Was this real? Was this truly happening? But as quickly as excitement built up, doubt began to creep in. What if it was too much? What if he couldn't handle it? He was just a kid from Riverside City, from a broken home, with nothing to his name but a few crumpled dollar bills and the tattered shoes on his feet. His thoughts were interrupted one afternoon by a knock at the door. He hesitated for a moment before opening it, already half expecting to see Carter again. But when he pulled it open, it wasn't the man in the sharp wool coat who stood there. Instead, it was a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, wearing a professional yet approachable outfit. She smiled warmly at him. Jaden, right? She asked, her voice soft but confident. Yeah, that's me, Jaden said, confused. Who are you? My name's Olivia, she replied, holding out a business card. I work with Carter Whitmore. I'm here to help you get started with everything. The scholarship, the schooling. Whatever you need, I'm here for you. Jaden took the card, his heart pounding faster now. Carter sent you? Olivia nodded. He trusts you, Jaden. He believes in you. And we're going to make sure you have the support you need to succeed. There's no turning back now. The words hung in the air as if they had suddenly shifted everything. Jaden's stomach turned, not with fear, but with the weight of possibility. Everything was changing, and it felt too much to bear. Yet, at the same time, it felt like the first time in his life that he might actually have a shot at something better. Are you ready to make it happen? Olivia asked, her eyes meeting his with a sincerity that caught him off guard. Jaden stared at her, and for the first time, he realized he didn't have to face the future alone. Yeah, he said, voice steady, even though his heart raced. I'm ready. As Olivia walked him through the next steps, how to apply for housing, how to enroll in classes, how to start building a future that didn't depend on survival, Jaden finally allowed himself to imagine something beyond his current life. A world where he could actually learn, where he could have a shot at something bigger. The thought didn't scare him anymore. It filled him with hope. Weeks passed, and Jaden's life transformed in ways he could never have imagined. The mornings were no longer a scramble for breakfast, or a race against time to avoid being late for school. He had a schedule now, one that included a tutor, a warm breakfast, and time to focus on his studies. He still didn't have much, but now he had the tools to build something more than just survival. The scholarship had unlocked doors that had once been completely out of reach. His first day at the new school felt surreal. He walked through the hallways of a well-kept building, his feet clicking against the polished floors, and he almost couldn't believe that he was a part of it. He belonged, at least for now. But there was still the feeling, deep in his chest, that he was a stranger in a world that didn't quite fit him. The wealthy kids, the ones who didn't have to worry about bills or food or finding the next meal, seemed to exist in a different universe. Jaden sometimes felt like an outsider. The world around him seemed so different from the cramped apartment, the cold nights, the hunger. And yet, as he passed through those hallways, he carried with him the memory of the old man, James. James, who had given him the push to keep going, to be better. The old man's words were still fresh in his mind, his grateful eyes locked on Jaden that night, when he had given him the warmth and compassion he'd been missing for so long. "I have to make this count," Jaden whispered to himself one evening, standing in front of the mirror as he straightened his collar. For him. For me. It was a mantra he said to himself every day now. One night, as Jaden was studying late in the kitchen, there was a knock at the door. He opened it, surprised to see a familiar face standing there. "Carter," Jaden said, blinking in disbelief. What are you doing here?" Carter smiled, stepping inside. He looked a little different now, less tense, less rushed. He seemed more at ease. "I came to check on you, Jaden," Carter said, his eyes scanning the room. "I want to make sure you're not just surviving, but thriving. You've got this chance now. I want to help you make the most of it." Jaden's heart fluttered in his chest. "I'm doing my best," he said quietly. Carter nodded. "I know you are. And that's why I'm here. To make sure you know that you have everything you need to succeed. Whether that's tutoring, guidance, or just someone to talk to. You're not in this alone." For the first time, Jaden realized that Carter wasn't just helping him because of James. He was helping him because he saw potential in him, because he believed in him. "I won't let you down," Jaden said, his voice full of gratitude. Carter's eyes softened, and he placed a hand on Jaden's shoulder. "I know you won't. Now, let's make sure you have everything you need to make that happen." Jaden smiled, a real smile, the kind that came from knowing that his future wasn't a distant dream anymore. It was something he could reach out and touch. He wasn't alone. He never would be again.